Greetings, listeners. Mrs. Kearns here, bringing you my first podcast in Studio 230 at PRMS. Our topic today is on bias, specifically media bias. Everyone has an opinion, and that's especially true in the media. Things like newspapers, television shows, movies, radio broadcasts, books, you name it. So why is it important to understand bias? Any good researcher knows that when gathering information about a topic, you must ensure that your sources are reliable and credible. What you also have to keep in mind is that even though the sources you rely upon to write about or report on a topic might be credible, those same sources might also have a particular bias or opinion about the topic. Sometimes the tricky part is figuring out what that bias might be, because it isn't always going to be overt or obvious. It's your job as a reporter to gather information and develop your own thoughts, formulate your own opinions, and make your own claims. Read, watch, and listen to as much as you can about the topic, then decide for yourself. So before we continue, let's define a few things. Here's what you get when you look up fact, opinion, and bias. A fact is a piece of information presented as having an objective reality, knowledge, or information based on real occurrences. An opinion is a view, judgment, or appraisal formed in the mind about a particular matter, a belief or judgment that rests on grounds insufficient to produce complete certainty. And a bias is an inclination of temperament or outlook, especially a personal and sometimes unreasoned judgment. I know, I just said a lot of big words. So what you need to realize is this. A bias may be based on incomplete information. The purpose of the writing might be to intentionally persuade the reader, or the writer might be influenced by his or her own experiences, causing certain attitudes to be revealed through the descriptions and explanations. Bias can be a dangerous thing when trying to gather facts, as an author's bias creeps into his or her writing, and if the reader is not careful, may be persuaded to assume those judgments are facts. Bias can also cause the writer to intentionally mislead the public. The writer might have a specific agenda. Keeping all this in mind, when trying to formulate your own opinions, particularly about a person like we will be doing, you must notice these biases, intentional or not, and understand that each author has a specific purpose for the writing. Each author is trying to convince the reader to think a certain way about the topic. As the reader, it's your job to read up on all sides of the issue to form your own opinion, not simply adopt the opinion of a single person. Make your own conclusions. Have a mind of your own. So for you, my young readers, the question is, how do you determine the bias or the slant of the writing? For our purposes, we're going to examine bias in various types of texts, specifically newspapers and books. Our practice subject is a very well-known contemporary figure, Steve Jobs. Many of you listening own something that you simply can't live without that Steve Jobs invented. iPhones, iPads, iPods, Macs, and the list goes on. I know that personally I'm always on my iPhone. Without it, I feel like I'm missing a limb. There are many things that are indisputable about this man, Steve Jobs. With his partner, Steve Wozniak, Jobs revolutionized the computer industry with Apple computers. Jobs was hugely successful despite many roadblocks along the way. He was able to create products that have revolutionized the way we live our everyday lives. When you read up on Steve Jobs, you'll come across his many achievements. But what you will also find are books and articles with varying opinions about the man who was Steve Jobs. Some portray him as a brilliant and intense man who could be brutally honest. Others will flat out call him a jerk. In one article entitled "Stay Hungry, Stay Foolish," the author describes, quote, "Only aliens could be unaware of the innovative and beautiful products from the creative mind of Steve Jobs and his workshop, and their impact in the worlds of education, entertainment, and communication." From this, one can clearly tell the author of this article has a favorable opinion about Jobs. In another article written in 2012 from Wired magazine, the author Ben Austin writes, quote, To some, Jobs' life has revealed the importance of sticking firmly to one's vision and goals, no matter the psychic toll on employees or business associates. To others, Jobs serves as a cautionary tale, a man who changed the world, but at the price of alienating almost everyone around him. Here, the author presents the two sides of this man at the heart of this controversial reputation. To date, there have been countless articles and numerous books written about Jobs. In 2011, a best-selling biography entitled Steve Jobs was written by a respected author, Walter Isaacson. In fact, Jobs sought Isaacson out specifically to write his biography. Isaacson says to have conducted over 100 interviews with Jobs' family, friends, colleagues, and competitors, as well as 40 interviews with Jobs himself, in order to write what he felt would be an accurate depiction of this man. In an interview with CBS News, Isaacson explains he was not warm and fuzzy. He goes on to say,